Committee meeting this morning. Welcome to those online. We have Member Edmonds online, our Community Board representative for the Kaikoui Hokianga area. And welcome, we've got one person in the public gathering this morning. No mai haramai, welcome. And welcome to those online. We'll start off this morning with the karakia and Councillor Stratford.
Thank you.
Whakatakate hau ki te uru, whakatakate hau ki te tonga, kia ngā kina ki uta, kia ngā taratara ki tai. E he akianga o te ātakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu. Te mauri ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Stratford. And welcome to our gentleman this morning, Andy, and to our CEO. Sean Clark, thank you. We will start off with the agenda. We have no declarations for the public agenda this morning. We will have one later in PX, and that's at approximately 2:30. So if we can please move through. I've got any apologies today. One being Dave Pollard. I'm happy to move that. Second by Councillor Stratford. All in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. I'll also raise the matter on, just in the notes, to follow up if Councillor Rudd is still on this committee or not. That hasn't been resolved and he has not been in attendance for some time. Not sure if he's on any committees. So move on to item 4.1, confirmation of minutes. To move that. To seconder.
Yes.
Councillor Smith, thank you. Any matters to raise? No? Any changes? Excellent. All in favour? Aye. Those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Information reports. First being 5.1, Waka Kotahi New Zealand Transport Agency Technical Audit of the Far North District Council. Would anyone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Court. Seconder, Councillor Usage. And we have a speaker this morning. Thank you very much for coming, Calvin. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, Councillors. I'm filling in for Kushla, who's taking a well-deserved week's leave this week. So the purpose of this report is to provide the Infrastructure Committee with an update on the technical audit that was completed in late November, early December last year. So every 2 years, 2 to 4 years, Waka Kotahi do a audit on process and how we are performing out of the network compared to their standards, how the funding is being, the program is being delivered, and the quality of those results. I guess I'll take the paper as read and just ask if there's any specific questions about the audit outcomes.
Thank you, Calvin. I'll open that floor, but prior to that, our General Manager, Andy, do you want to comment on this paper?
Through the Chair, I just sort of make some general comments and welcome Calvin being here today to talk to a number of information reports with respect to the Northland Transportation Alliance and their performance. I think it's probably worth putting a little bit of context to what is effectively a range of good news reports in terms of where the Northland Transportation Alliance is at this point in time, and put it into the context of messaging we are getting from Waka Kotahi around future funding and condition of the network. And it's quite clear that at the moment there are challenges with the condition of the state highway network in Northland compared to the national average, and also that our roading levels of service currently fall below those that should be achieved through the One Network framework. And just to put into context that Waka Kotahi have announced reductions in maintenance and operation funding in their indicative settlement, and it's just really a general message that will potentially impact or continue to impact upon the quality of the network, roading network, both state highway and local roads in Northland. And as those numbers are finalised in September, we will do an assessment through the asset management plan and bring that information back to this committee and outline what the potential consequences of those funding decisions made by central government are likely to be. Would also just remind, this was outlined to elected members around network condition does impact upon road safety, and whilst government is investing or looking to invest heavily in road safety, then it does seem to be a rather perverse decision that cutting maintenance whilst trying to encourage better outcomes in road safety could be a challenge for them. And probably the third one is the decarbonisation of transport. So clearly the announcement this week around electric vehicles is one step in that, but clearly there will be, the future funding will be targeted around walking, cycling and multimodal solutions and not necessarily those that support car usage. So just to put a bit of framework, a bit of context around the reports that we're having today, and it's something that we as an infrastructure committee and a transport provider will need to consider. But that just gives you a little bit of context and really just to confirm the messaging you'll get from Calvin today that the NTA is in a good place at this point to respond to those challenges, and the information reports that were provided today will underline and reinforce that message around being in a good place. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. We'll go to Anne as a first elected member. However, prior to our CEO, Sean, did you have comments on this paper?
No, just to talk about what Andy's saying and to add to context, which is really just 5 minutes old, because bottom line up front, we mean between the three of us to give confidence to elected members that this next 3 years of capital and MO is going to be as more disruptive than you've ever seen because of the financial fall. I just want to say out loud to elected members that we know you want the say over what comes off, what the priorities might be. In our deep in history, we, as good staff, have just reorganised the plan to try and make it fit the budget. So just say out loud that we acknowledge that you wanted a say in that. Because it's not till September we know what the numbers are. An incomplete conversation between Kelvin and I, we haven't quite joined up with Andy, is we wanted to try and get some explanation back to you at perhaps the next infrastructure committee, just to say what it is that's going on in the first quarter and why that is so safe and logical before we get into what discretion may be exercised by elected members, your choice over the following 3 quarters. We just want to keep that conversation going, and there'll be conversations outside of session too, just about why our work program is what it is. There's not a lot of flexibility in it, with some really strong preferences from the technicians about which things must go ahead. So we want to be open with that. As of 5 minutes ago, because the $17 million shortfall in our MO&R has not been broken down into M&O, which is operate OPEX, and R, which we treat as capital. And within that money, we're not sure whether it's which of the dozen compartments, whether it's safety or sealing or whatever, what Kotahi was predicting a shortfall, because they don't know themselves and wait till September. We've had real problems putting the LTP together in a way that's auditable, because the rule says that you can't make promises in the long-term plan and rate accordingly when you've got any suspicion that you're never going to deliver those works. And so we had to find other ways of re-expressing to the Auditor General or to the public how our long-term plan was going to handle the roading uncertainties. The good news, the bad news is we were told by the Auditor General we would have a qualified long-term plan, which is like a hanging offence for CFOs. They're really offended down there, and we spent the last 48 hours at CEO level in what we call Tahi, Office of the Auditor General, and with other councils trying to find a way through. And as of half an hour ago, we were just told that that the Office of the Auditor General met this morning on opinion review committee, and we were on their agenda, and we had the qualification lifted. There are 3, what are they called, Will? Notices, whatever that phrase is, for a lesser point of interest.
Qualification.
Not qualification, the one below that. So we are no longer have a qualification, and that basically says that we have got, sorry, we've forgotten the name of that. We now have a clear path forward for the LTP to be approved by you for the end of the financial year. But the bottom line of all this is it's very disrupted. 3 years coming, and we will be transparent as we can with you to show where the imperatives are and where the options are for you to exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to keep an eye on the clock so I don't go over time. There's an awful lot in this conversation. Before I get to the point as your roading representative, I need to keep you informed on what's going on nationally, and I think Andy and Sean have done a really good job of that so far. I attended the Road Controlling Authority Forum in Wellington last week, and a report will be coming to the next council meeting on that. The signals are really bad in the roading space, and we need to be very alive to the fact that Waka Kotahi is now saying decreased levels of service are not off the table. So, in the Far North context, we have heard a lot of evidence through RFSs and through our customers that our state highway network in particular was not meeting an acceptable level of service. We received the audit on our network, which Waka Kotahi undertook. So I requested under the Official Information Act a copy of the audit that was taken on the state highway network. I subsequently received that report and read it, and it didn't make for flash reading. I tabled it at the Regional Land Transport Committee, and subsequently it was handed over to the NTA, who have gone through the audit and produced a preliminary report. It's just in an email form this time. That email indicates that our network is not meeting the One Network Road Classification Standard of Service. I raised that with the Regional Relationships Manager and said to him that the promise was, when they introduced the One Network Road Classification, was that no matter where you lived in New Zealand, no matter what your costs, your network would receive the appropriate level of service for where you lived. So we're a region, we're not a metro, so you can't compare us to Auckland because you'll win it. So we compare ourselves with our peer groups. So comparing ourselves with our peer groups, our network does not meet an acceptable level of service. And if I turn your mind back to the last Regional Land Transport Plan process, our funding application was moderated down because our asset management plan did not meet a standard that Waka Kotahi felt justified our funding application. So we had a review, we undertook significant works, and hats off to all the staff and the NTA involved in that. We brought our asset management plan up to an acceptable standard. It's recognised as being an exemplar of good practice. That supported our funding application this time round. And we moderated down, there is no money in the bucket. Why is there no money in the bucket? It's a combination of the fact that due to COVID, people stopped driving their cars. So the bucket of money is fuel excise levies, road user charges, ground lease rentals, and fees and registrations. People stopped driving during COVID. there was less money in the bucket. So Waka Kotahi have got less money. There's no point shooting the messenger. They're in a difficult spot. So they've had to moderate down budget across New Zealand. At the same time, the government has introduced a whole raft of new policy, including funding multimodal transport out of that bucket. So what we're seeing is coastal shipping, and it's a small amount, but it's in there, rail and cycling, and you'll all be aware of the controversy over the new walking and cycling bridge over the Waitemata Harbour. That is all being funded out of road user charges and fuel excise levy. So you have all the people that are driving cars over here and trucks putting the money in the bucket, and that bucket is being diminished. And it's being diminished because it's being spread very thin, and it's being diminished because there's less money going in. So we have some significant funding challenges moving forward. And yesterday the Chief Executive and I were on a Zoom call where we got a very, very clear message that it's only going to get worse in New Zealand. So for those of you who were present in Whangarei, I put the question to the Minister, and Councillor Smith was there and the Chief Executive was there. I put the question to the Minister, and the Minister said, I've commissioned an independent review of the funding model. I expect that work will take 5 to 10 years to complete. We don't have 5 to 10 years. And it's going to mean that the network will be in managed decline, and we will not be able to achieve our key performance indicators. On the other side of the ledger, we have just adopted the Regional Land Transport Plan, and as part of that process, we are required to identify what our regional priorities are. They've been removed from the plan by the Minister. And that raises a question in my mind about the integrity of the process when we sit here as, and I'm being really brave here, and I know this is a public meeting and I know we're being recorded, so I'm being very careful with my words. Raises questions in my mind about the integrity of the process when we are creatures of the Land Transport Management Act, which specifies a process that we must follow. We follow that process, and with no consultation whatsoever, our projects are removed and our funding is reduced. So the question is next steps. What are the next steps? And I've asked the Chief Executive yesterday that we need to start a conversation about what next steps look like. I can't add any more to that conversation at the moment. To the report, and I'm still within my time, to the report, can I just say too many acronyms? I live and breathe roading, and I had to Google yesterday, and I still don't have them all. MRT, RRPE, CNP, HEC, all the so no more acronyms unless it has an acronym cheat sheet attached. Two things specifically relating to the report, Madam Chair. Page 37 and 38 of the report, the audit recommends bridge postings be captured in the bylaws. This is not addressed in the staff response. I don't expect to resolve that today, but I do think we need to look at that. But I'm also mindful that Councillor Smith has an enormous amount of bylaw work on the policy and the strategy agenda, I should say. And I'm not sure about the efficacy of that, so I just need a bit more clarity around that. And on page 39, 40 and 41, the report talks a lot about condition ratings. And it says if a condition rating, these are my notes. If a condition rating is considered inaccurate, is recommended by the audit. And the recommendation that we drop our methodology and adopt what we consider to be not good practice. Perhaps we should be having a conversation then and see if Kotahi about changing that condition. Because it's quite clear that Waka Kotahi don't use that condition themselves, they don't use that measure. They're requiring us to use that measure, but they recognise that it has significant shortcomings, and then slap us on the audit if we're not using their condition rating. So instead of getting tagged audit, I'm just wondering if perhaps we should be having a conversation with Waka Kotahi around them modifying their condition rating audit requirement nationally. And I'm now at 9 minutes, so I'm going to stop. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are we able to please have the staff to respond if there's any matters because there were floating raised? And thank you to Councillor Court for all of your work in this space. It's much appreciated.
So through the Chair, I'll take away the comment about the bylaws and go back on that with the bridging one. With respect to the condition rating, we are having this audit was completed at the same time as a similar audit on WDC's network. Most of the findings in this audit were a cut and paste of the WDC findings, which is showing we continue for consistency. In particular, this condition rating one is one that we objected heavily to in terms of being marked down for it, for not only for the reasons that Councillor Cord has already said about the state highway not doing this methodology, but also the historic methodology is inherently unsafe for the people who do it. So the high-speed data survey methodology that we use is a lot safer, a lot more effective, and a lot more efficient. So what we're seeing within Waka Kotahi at the moment is a bit of a disconnect between the auditors who audit to documented standards and the technical specialist group who are, I guess, trying to chase technology and innovation to get the standards to match what is actually being done out there, because there's quite a few local councils who are following the same methodology as we are. We've been using this since about 2014 and it's been actively promoted as the safe and most effective way of getting a good picture of your asset condition. So it's one that I've actually been talking to Rob Forlong as chair of the Mta Alliance Leadership Group about compiling a letter from the region, effectively, to Waka Kotahi on this issue in particular, because it's one that we don't feel it's fair to be marked down.
Thank you, Councillor Buttigieg, and then Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Court. You've actually taken a bit of heat off my head. When I read this report, I was not happy for several reasons. And one is the poor state of our roads. So you've gone through that, so I won't mention that still more. But also, I just want to note, we see on page 22, there's a rising death rate. And yes, I agree with our chief's infrastructure there, that maintenance of the roads are really important to prevent death. You just need to look at some of the pictures, and if I quickly scan through, I can just find the picture on, page where we've seen substantial subsidence. I can see a picture somewhere there. And how can you avoid getting, somewhere in the corner? The sharp corners, we heard about roads mentioned just yesterday, in fact, that were, cutting the speed limit because the roads were in such a shocking state that people and children and buses were being injured because of the rough ride on buses. So that off my chest, I'll move on, and then I start to think, why are we not being funded? And as Councillor Court has said, and I would say that, look, I do think there's something morally wrong when you're taking funding from road users, have a state of the road in such poor shape that people are getting hurt, people are getting killed, that industry can't function properly, and I'll point to page 37 on that one, and then do other things and expect the rural community to pick up on some of the reductions. While I agree with let's decarbonise our road use, but it's far more strategic to take the highest emitters of fuel, which is cities where they tightly packed, they have alternative transport modes, and you tackle that first. That to me is setting priorities. When there's no money there, which I struggle to believe, then set priorities and look at what is crucial so that your industry can continue, that food production can continue, and don't penalise everybody unduly. Putting some of the restrictions on rural people who cannot get to work on a bicycle or any other means, or even afford an electric car, is not being equitable. So that off my chest, I'm turning to page 37, and here's some of the problems we have. Here's a high performance motor vehicle going across the Class 1 bridge, which has been noted. What are we meant to do? The only thing we can do when a risk, again, putting life on the limb, and these bridges aren't designed to carry the load, so we post on there a maximum weight limit. What does the industry do? Do they just simply say, sorry, there's no alternative bridge, sorry Mr Foresters, we are not going to harvest, and that's going to cost us millions, as well as the millions that's currently costing for the 13 months to fix the Mangamoka Road, State Highway 1. So I feel we've been neglected up here, and I will not buy the statement that there's no money available. There's a care and duty of care that needs to be done by central government and the funding. I'm not hitting the ECGA. I realise, I should say Wakakotahi, but I'm not hitting them because I realise that they are caught with COVID and funding shortfall. But I'd say to central government, let's set appropriate priorities in that case where you can meet your decarbonise, and where you can allocate funding where at least we're not killing people and allowing the economy to still function. So I'm not happy, so sorry, Madam Chair. Apart from that, I thank MTA for the work you're doing and actually bringing this to the attention. Because only when it's actually out there can we actually start addressing it and the full cost. And I'm really disappointed, Councillor Court, that our submissions have been changed without consultation. And when I see that in the Waikato, they got more than 100% than they requested. So there are priorities that are mixed up.
Thank you, Councillor. Being the NTA, I don't expect Calvin to respond on that.
That's going to be my response.
We do have our media communications manager in the room though, and I'm sure that he's taking note of the matters raised, because as a council I do think that we need to make the public aware of the significant issue. And to keep everyone accountable that are making these decisions that are impacting us significantly. We've got Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morning, Calvin. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. Once I got my head around how to process this report, I actually found it quite good, but it did take me a couple of reads to figure out, and lots of note taking, is to understand what I was looking for in the report. But once I got my head around it, it was really good. As Andy has acknowledged, I really want to acknowledge that really highlights the progress that you guys have made in this space, and also recognise the number of responses to the recommendations and suggestions that have been accepted by Waka Kotahi. I think that shows how incredibly proactive you are in this space. However, I am a little bit concerned about a couple of things, so I think I've got about 3 questions. The first one is the number of recommendations, the number of responses to the recommendations and suggestions that have been accepted. I'm a little bit concerned about the number of them that are subject to funding. And so I guess my question is, knowing what we know with all of the commentary that we've had this morning, what is our plan B? How are we looking to manage that risk going forward? Because if we're going to see a significant decrease in level of service, and we know in order to make improvements we're subject to funding, it puts us in a really awkward position. So that's my first question, is what are we doing to manage the risk in that space? My second question was actually along the lines of Councillor Court and the mandatory requirement for the condition rating side of things. So again, I think you've kind of addressed my concerns around managing the risk on that as well, knowing, again, subject to funding, can we afford to be pushing back on Waka Kotahi, and what level of that are we happy to sit with? And then my final question is around the monitoring of the progress. So you guys have made amazing progress in this space over the last 4 years, and it looks like subject to funding, we will continue to make that progress. But because it is subject to funding, knowing what we know, my question is, what are the processes in place to monitor the success of these? But also, given the risk, what is a reasonable governance expectation in terms of reporting and keeping oversight of that? Roading is the biggest, is it 19 cents of every dollar? It's our biggest portfolio within council, and when we look at financial risks in that, it's quite concerning. So what is the governance oversight that is a reasonable level over the next 4 years in this? Thank you.
Tuesday, I guess managing the funding risk first against the not only the highlights that are the responses that are in the audit, but also our entire activity management plan submission, which was for funding, is based on good asset management practice, and this is what we need to improve and maintain level of service. I guess the fact that we now do have an activity management plan and strategies based on all the different asset types mean that we are in a much better position information-wise to understand the key risk and focus prioritisation areas. So where we are funding constrained, we know which areas, which particular assets may be able to be prolonged in terms of some maintenance or renewals, and which assets we actually need to focus on. I guess the funding that's being indicated to be approved for MO&R at the moment is a slight lift to the previous 3-year cycle, but what it doesn't recognise is the current condition of the network. And so our conversations and our submission, the money that was put in there, supported by the activity management plan, was based on recognition using data that there needed to be an extra top-up of investment in the far north, particularly unsealed road network, to get it to a maintainable level of service. So I guess our challenge is now going to be, how do we do that with the funding that's not there, while at the same time recognising that the maintaining of a declining network costs more. So this is the stuff that we're doing with the Unsealed Road Centre of Excellence. We're seeing some really good results in the areas we are able to put the new metal blend and road composite down. Saw some photos yesterday of some roads that had that heavy metal treatment done 13 months ago. They've been graded twice. So they're actually holding and maintaining the way they are. So a lot of this is about how we can use better upfront maintenance techniques to prolong the life of the asset, and that's where we just have to get smarter about how we're doing things. But our disappointment is the same as yours in terms of the audit, and the fact that we know we've got strategies, we know we've got activity management plans, we know we've got priority lists that identify what needs to be done. It's a case of we would like to just be able to get on and do it. And so now it's about how we can prioritise what it is we're getting on and doing for the biggest bang for buck and lowest risk. So in that funding space, for the monitoring progress, we are looking at, I guess there's a number of audits that come through from Wakatahi that do comparative data, which we've seen here. There's the progress against LTP submission, where you'll be able to see what we've submitted versus what we've had to take out, and we'll have that conversation with council. But I guess the biggest area is us moving to a more data-based analysis of the condition of the network out there. So one of the pieces of work we're doing at the moment that we hope to bring to infrastructure either next meeting or the one after is some comparative analysis of the levels of service versus the complaints, and also the level of council expenditure versus the roads that are causing the most issues. Because what we're tending to find based on initial analysis is that the roads that are the lowest volume, the lowest travelled, and therefore the lowest funded, are also the most complained. And at a certain point there needs to be a prioritisation decision by council, informed by asset management data, about what is, given our funding constraints, acceptable for those roads. And that's where I guess ultimately we're measured on customer satisfaction, but a lot of the next 3 years is going to be about setting some real expectations with the customers about what we can and can't do on the roads and how we can do it. But I think probably the biggest thing in terms of how we monitor performance is we are moving away from that subjective view of and dollar view to more quantities. This is what's being achieved. This is what we plan to do. This is what we actually did. And actually starting to provide that information to the Infrastructure Committee, which I think you will see in your next Infrastructure Committee report from about maintenance checks and price. So,
Thank you. Madam Chair, will you allow me just a further comment, please?
We are constrained with time.
I'll keep it very brief. I think this is a really good example of where we can be connecting our committees together. We've talked on a number of occasions about the risk of central government funding processes to the organisation at the Assurance, Risk and Finance Committee, and I think that this is a really reasonable one to ensure that we're including these in our affordability risks, our health and safety risks, our climate change risks, as we face these further constraints. So I just wanted to highlight that at this committee, and I'll raise it again this afternoon.
Councillor Strickland.
Oh, thank you. So just coming back to what the report is capturing, how well our performance has been on maintaining and managing our roads, and there are gaps, as Councillor Vucic highlighted. Our roads aren't, very good. And just coming back to what you said, Calvin, about prioritising, heading towards walking away from some roads. I really took offence to the Waka Kotahi statement about our unsealed dusty roads and the way that we've been managing them. And I've included it in my feedback to their survey that they sent out to us, because in Councillor Court, this is something you know too well, because you've been involved in dusty roads for a really long time. People were there first in their homes, and then forestry came. Those houses have been there for 80 years, and then forests get planted and harvested. We can't just do nothing, and I'm really pleased that we've got a strategic decision-making tool in place to help us with dust suppression. But just because we did some 1 year doesn't mean that it's not going to need doing, in a few years' time again. It doesn't stop, and I don't think that the level of service increasing has increased the demand. I think that people's awareness of the health implications of PM10 have increased, and that's not caning you. I'm just, making sure that my colleagues know that I'm not going to let dust go. And also, I had written down the bylaw item around the bridges too. We have it up on our website, but how do we make sure that these companies, the trucking companies, are actually checking our website and make sure, planning out their route safely to, would a bylaw even assist? I don't think so. But do we need to improve our relationships with the forestry trucks or dairy? Do we, need to send that list out to them? And do they, to have permission to use our road, should they send us a route plan? Because our bridges are in a poor state, and we're not going to be able to upgrade them to the speed that we need to. And their weight going on those bridges is just causing more damage. But yeah, bringing it back to this, if I was a customer looking at that, it makes, some of this makes us look bad. And with the money that we're going to now be receiving, how do we figure out which, like you said, Calvin, what are the priorities going forward? How can we improve on the roads such as, Waikaria, or, that have sheer drops with no barrier, and it highlights things like that in this report. We've got kilometres of roads like that have no warnings or anything. Yeah. Thank you.
Just through the chair in response to that, I recognise there are some issues in the report. I think what's important not to lose sight of is the table on page 22, which indicates improvement in most areas.
Yes.
And particularly in the activity management planning where, as the chair pointed out, 3 years ago there was some significant shortfalls in that.
Absolutely.
So I guess from a governance perspective, there should be a level of comfort that we know what we should be doing and we have plans and strategies around what needs to be done. The funding makes that journey a little harder and a little longer, but it means in times when your funding is constrained, knowing what your priorities are becomes more important.
Yes.
And at the moment, we know what our priorities are. And so what we need to do is come back to council when we get the funding finally confirmed and just do a double check, as Sean said, that the priorities of the activity management plan line up with the priorities of council and line up with the priorities of the community, and tweak those that we can that don't. But knowing that we've got a plan should give some reassurance that in tight times at least we're focusing on the right things.
Yeah.
Thank you, Calvin. I'll just remind members as well, we have a discussion at 10:30. We've got the advanced to speak next online, and also note that our Mayor, John Carter, is online as well.
Thank you. First, a question of Calvin. You mentioned the low volume roads having an inordinate amount of complaints. My question is, are we dealing with entitled people who have a higher expectation of the road, or are their roads actually in bad nick?
Through the chair, I think it's a combination of both, and that's part of the reason why we're looking at the data in terms of what roads are being complained about, what is the validity of the complaints. We're also looking at the data in terms of, I think it's referenced in the quarterly update in one of the later reports. We recognise that the current contractor performance scores don't necessarily reflect the actual perception of the unsealed network out on the road. So we're looking at the mechanisms of how we can put them together. In some cases, it is about unrealistic expectations. In other cases, there are some very, very valid concerns with the condition of the road. And I guess one of the things to highlight is in my email inbox, once I get more than 5 complaints about a road, I make a folder for it. I only have about 10 folders. So most of the roads are the same roads, and in some cases, we do need to recognise that often people have a belief that if they continue to complain, they will get it sealed. And ultimately that is the outcome and that they're looking for. And often any solution we give them that isn't sealing is not going to be satisfactory. So that's where the expectations come in. We are seeing in areas where we've put some significant investment in the heavy metalling program using the new blend and everything else, that those complaints are falling off. But we're still getting that underlying of, yes, it's better, but it's still not what I want.
Okay, can I follow up here? I'd just like to make the comment. I understand what you say, Kelvin, and if for the cases where they have unrealistic expectations, I accept that we're not going to do anything. However, just because something's low volume shouldn't mean that it's off the list for 3 reasons, really. Firstly, if it's in bad nick and it's low volume, it would indicate that it hasn't been maintained for a while, because low volume would surely mean a slow degradation. And secondly, if we don't do anything now, if we do something now, surely the investment would pay off, because once again, slow degradation and a long-term effect. And the third thing is, I'm very wary of using this argument of low volume or few people to delay investment, because we turn around and we talk about central government doing exactly the same to the far north. We complain, the central government will say there's not enough people in the far north, they're too far out, there's not enough economic activity up there, we're not going to spend in the far north. And to a person around this table, we get all up in arms and saying that's not fair. And yet we are quite happy to do it to our low volume roads or our far away communities. So I just warn about, or I try to warn, I guess, away from the idea is just because there's fewer people, they should expect less. So thank you very much.
To the Chair, just quickly to address that, what we're saying with one volume, low volume, is that the funding that is applied to low volume and the prioritisation is in accordance with its priority and one network framework, which is the national framework for those. By nature, that means that those types of roads have a lower level of service expectation and a lower level of funding associated with them when you compare them with a primary collector or a arterial road. They are actually built to a lower quality standard initially. So please don't think that through anything that we've said we're going to ignore or leave these roads alone. They still have their their monthly maintenance inspection cycles. They still have their routine maintenance. What we're saying is they're at a level now that requires investment to actually bring them up to standard, and we are constrained in where we can invest. So that's
Thank you, Calvin. And I'll wrap this up. I am aware of our timeframes. I did have a couple of minutes note, but they have been raised by other members, particularly the bridges. It's always a concern. And our state highway condition. It is frustrating when you see that doing a speed review of the entirety of Northland, when we have people sadly dying on our roads, and in my opinion, I think it's a reflection of the poor standard of those roads, which is really quite sad, and I can see why people get upset about that, let alone angry and frustrated. And we're the messenger, so I think what we need to do is make people know in advance, using our communications, that this is in the pipeline, that we are the messenger. People are already frustrated about the level of service they're receiving, let alone if they're going to have a reduced level of service further to that in the future. We need to ensure that that message is loud and clear, that that's not necessarily our decision. Thank you, and we'll have the council report with the road reply.
Yeah, Chair, I'm just going to use my right of reply because I'm not prepared to accept this, and I don't think anybody in the far north should be prepared to accept this. We are representing 71,000 people who expect us to put our best foot forward, and when the announcement was made that 4 laning was going to be removed from the regional prioritisation list in favour of rail, I would encourage you all to go to my website, my Facebook page, and watch. It's an hour and a half. It's not a short video, but it is the New Zealand Herald Premium subscriber interview that was filmed at the Sky Tower with the Minister of Transport, the architects of the Northland Port Study, and Mayor of Auckland. There is no plan to invest in Northland Port, none. But based on that, the government has pulled our road funding and put the entire bucket of money into rail. At the same time here in the Kaikoui area particularly, we are investing in water and electricity for our horticultural industries. All the avocados, all the berries, all the fruit and vegetables, the flowers, the fish, the produce that we produce here in Northland need a road network. They need a road network that is going to get that produce through in time and undamaged. When the announcement was made last Friday, you were here, so you missed it. Unfortunately, the Deputy Prime Minister was up, and he got given his pedigree by the Chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. In no uncertain terms, he was told that the caning of the 4 laning was the death sentence for Northland. At the same time, I had the chair of Northland Link just about in tears, saying this is annexing Northland from the rest of New Zealand. And there are a number of industries out there, and the big ones, the Waipapa pine, the Juukan issues, are really concerned about the impact of this on the viability and sustainability of their businesses going forward. So I don't want to be the messenger. I want to be the champion that pushes back and says this is not acceptable. And so what I'd like for the Far North District Council to do as a result of this meeting is schedule some time where we can agree on a strategy moving forward. That's a strategy that will empower me as your representative on the Regional Land Transport Committee to take this further. And we push back and we say it's not okay. And that Northland matters and our roads matter. Madam Chair, that's what I'd like. I don't want, I know we've slightly moved from the report. I will, not slightly, significantly. But this is my opportunity. We need to do that. Or we're going to be facing the same Three Waters conversation in 10 years, where the government's going to step in and say, you've mismanaged your assets. Local government, we're taking them off you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is that a formal amendment? I haven't got the wording.
I don't think I need a formal amendment at this point. I think Andy and Sean need time to consider how best to bring that back to us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank you for the consideration. Oh, I'm the Madam Chair, but thank you to Anne, who is our riding portfolio chair, in other words, who attends on behalf of our council. So we'll wrap this up. We've got 7 minutes until the deputation, and from Kiwi Rail. So all in favour of this item?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what deputation you're referring to. I don't have a deputation in my team.
It's in public exclusion.
And it came through after the agenda went to
And it is
From Kiwi Rail.
about the rail corridor.
So I'm sure you'll take great interest. Ooh.
I'd have put
So we'll move on to item 5.2. We've got 6 minutes. I'm happy to move.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councillor Stratford, I think, was first here. And another MTA paper. I'm not sure if Calvin needs to introduce this paper. We'll take it as read, and I'm sure we've got comments on it for 6 minutes. I'll open the floor with Councillor Busich.
Madam Chair, just very quickly, I realise the time, and on page 4 of 12 of the report, which is page 54 in your agenda, it's just a recommendation there. Thank you for those recommendations. Picking up on something that Councillor Smith said, recommendation one, that was actually brought to the committee and raised, and I did agree with it at the time. So I'm pleased about all this, but I'd like to keep track of this and where they fit so that we don't lose them. There is another risk I might add, and especially with the previous item, and that is the degradation of our asset. It's a huge, you probably know there just exactly how much our roading asset is, and not having the appropriate money to keep it to a standard means it's being degraded, and understand it has been degraded looking at the report, and there's a significant risk there that future generations are going to be faced with. So I'd really like to get information and reporting on that as well, just pinpoint some risks. And that's all my comments. So I'm pleased about that. It's been identified. Let's keep track of it so that we can address it.
Thank you, Councillor Busich. Councillor Port.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 57 of the report, it talks about street cleaning, and it said that we're not currently capturing street cleaning in our transport investment online, and I'm just wondering if we are looking to capture that moving forward.
As I understand it through the chair, the street cleaning is invoiced in an annual basis, and that's why it wasn't seen in the report, but I will follow up and find that Councillor level.
Thank you, Calvin. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, page 57, procurement procedures. My question is, and it outlines in here that there is a council endorsed procurement strategy which covers the Northland Transport Alliance. So I'm just looking for clarification as to whether or not our sustainable procurement framework that we have adopted within FNDC extends to the Northland Transport Alliance. And then additionally to that, I note that there's no improvement made in that space and no recommendations accepted. So just wanting an understanding or a clarification as to how we are going to improve in that space.
So through the chair, we're actually in the process of going through the review and update of the Mta Procurement Strategy, which is incorporating those sustainability and social outcomes that are within each of the council's own procurement strategies. I think, and for us to have a procurement strategy, it needs to actually have evidence that it follows the procurement strategies of the council. So there is that line of sight tie between the two. And I guess that's the overarching strategy. The actual procurement policies that we follow and procedures are in accordance with individual council procurement. So yeah, there's the overarching strategy which provides us some consistency in what we tell the market, but when we go out and procure a contract for Far North District Council, we do it in accordance with Far North District Council's procurement policy and standards.
Calvin, I had a similar matter to raise, page 58, about procurement, but of a different nature. I in particular liked the last sentence of that paragraph that has a suggestion of bundling similar scope works, such as low cost, low risk, and varying existing contracts where appropriate to ensure efficiencies, and also to do forward planning so that the delivery of those items is done in a more effective manner. And I think that other councils do that well. Case in point, Mta District Council, I note that at the start of their financial year, they have those listed and bundled and scoped so that their delivery is much more efficient, and I think we could learn a lot from the council in that respect. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, that is our plan. So now what we've been talking to Andy about is how we can bundle up, if possible, 3-year programs of work, including looking at whether in the future we can do 3-year ceiling cycles, for example, and which gives us most chance of success. If we have the priorities over the 3 years, it gives us some flexibility should we hit a resource consent issue, should we hit anything else that we can change the program around a little bit, keeping within annual budgets to make sure we're getting delivery, and it provides a contractor market with certainty of what's coming up. Our issue with that, unfortunately, leading into the cycle is that we don't yet know what those 3-year programs look like. So we had just got to the point, and it's part of the reason our delivery this year has been so successful in what we've been able to do, that we give the market the indications in March, so we start the year running and we've started procuring and everything else. We're a little bit hamstrung in this year, so we're going to be playing catch up for a few months.
Thank you, Councillor Strickland.
My query was around the procurement as well, and the item 5.5 took me to the manual or waka kotahi, and so then I had to read the whole thing. And I'm not very what's the word? I'm not put at ease by those, because I've seen some procurement go bad. I've seen some contractors be very poor with their engagement with their community, not know the area, not have any tikanga experience. And so is there a way that you're going to, through the rejig of the procurement strategy, make sure that that is improved?
So effectively, through the chair, effectively, we, as I think I mentioned at our last meeting, we're reliant on council resources to assist us with those processes, and we're on the same journey as other departments of councils in those areas. We don't have our own procurement department or procurement resources. And we don't have our own community engagement resources or iwi liaison resources. Those are provided through council. So as I mentioned in my response to Councillor Smith, is we follow the requirements of council, and if we identify shortfalls in them, then we'll have a conversation about how we can improve. But we don't create that collateral ourselves, but we recognise there are shortfalls in some of those contractor engagements. I guess the biggest thing we're identifying is the importance of actually an honest and true assessment at the procurement assessment stage, and understanding the value of a local knowledgeable contractor versus someone who may have given you a slightly better price. And using track record of whether they've been good at those activities or not as a positive or negative influencer of contract awards as well.
Thank you, Calvin. CEO, can you please take note of that? Because I have mentioned this to you before in our conversation.
And also, General Will Taylor would like to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is an issue which was raised with staff, and the Chief Executive had asked me to make a step change improvement in this space. So we moved from the old procurement board to the tender panel, and it would be fair to say, and I know we have a nod from Lindy and Calvin on this one, that we've had that step change improvement. We are very, very light on our feet, and one of the reasons for our improved performance in Andy's infrastructure department is because of the improved tender process which we now have. Is there room for improvement? Yes, there is, but there is. We are much lighter on our feet, much more quickly able to respond to market conditions. And as late as last Friday, we had an unusual set of circumstances which, going back 18 months ago, would probably have been pushed back by the previous process that we had, but we were able to think outside the box and come to a solution to enable us to go to tender very quickly. So things are better. Can we improve further? Yes, we can, but certainly step change improvements.
Thank you, Will. We'll need to now move into public exclusion. We don't have any on the public gallery, so
I'm going to vote.
we haven't voted on this, so all in favour was moved and seconded. Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. So I'm happy to move into public exclusion. Thank you, Councillor Stratford. All in favour? Aye. Those opposed? No. Carried. Thank you. So we'll now formally move into public exclusion. That includes online. So just a short break. We'll pause the videoing and we'll be back to our public agenda after the deputation by Kiwi Rail. session has now commenced. Great, thank you very much. Welcome back to the public meeting. We have completed our publicly explicit items. We do note that we will be bringing the KiwiWell presentation to the public part of the meeting. They have agreed that we can provide them with public information, and I'm sure that you'll be interested in the investments in our integrated transport network for the country, including rail to Whangarei and Otiria. So we are now on item 5.3. And I'm happy to move that. It's another NTA agenda item. I'll go to seconder.
Yep.
Councillor Stratford, thank you. And the seconder, would you like to start off with no comments? Got no comments. This is a good start.
Wrote it out.
And open it to the floor. 5.3. Thank you. I'd just like to say that I think it's important to recognise exemplary behaviour when we see it, or exemplary outcomes when we see it. And NTA and staff have not gone out of the park this year. And we have performed amazingly well. And because it's roading, it's probably never been loved by everybody or appreciated by everybody, but I think it's a turnaround between what we were doing and what we knocked out of the park this year needs to be recognised. So I just would like to report that, Madam Chair. That's all I have to say.
Councillor Ford, I have some comments, and first we have Councillor Busich.
Very quick comment on page 69, and that is the capital works program, which is taken a dip when you compare it to what the original forecast, but it's rising. If you can just comment on what the projection is, how we're going for that projection, given that the state of the roads and we need it.
Through the chair, so that graph there is shown to the end of March. Since that time, we have had 2 stellar months in terms of performance. We had, I think it was $9 million of expenditure successfully achieved in May, which compared to previous years of 36 million total expenditure is massive. We are now continuing to track against a grey forecast line with minimal. I think we're looking at about a 95 to 97% achievement of the total program.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busich. I've got 2 comments. So on page 68, and I've raised this with Andy as our General Manager, but also wanted to note with Calvin that it has been raised by the public about the amount of time it's taking for the MTA for comments on consenting and the change of conditions relating to developments since the MTA has been involved. I know that our district planners are consulting on its engineering standards, but as a governance unit, I think that we need to be aware that we've got a huge variance in the standard of roads from brand new greenfield developments compared to a 2-lot subdivision in the back blocks of a metal area, metal road. So we have a huge variance in that, but I'm not sure the consistency of the conditions that we're receiving because we don't have internal staff such as a development engineer as part of the working group within consenting. So I did want to highlight that, and I'm not sure if it's required to have a meeting with practitioners or set up a subcommittee of council to deal with any queries relating to that to the council itself, to this committee. And I don't expect a response today, but I have been asked to highlight that. And I'm not sure if the staff want to respond, but I think it might take some time and potentially some meetings with some stakeholders to provide some examples about the those matters. I'm not sure if Dean has any comment relating to that, but we have noticed a spike in the Section 37s, which double the time frame because of how long it's taking with the NTA.
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you, it's the volume of consents that we are receiving at the moment. So where appropriate, we are using Section 37 to manage not just the workload, but also those consents where we believe we can legitimately use Section 37. And obviously that requires some careful consideration also in terms of the applicant or the customer, in terms of how that decision is communicated. Not everyone accepts it, but we are working hard to manage that in a positive way.
Thank you, Dean. And we'll take this offline with our staff. We don't have a connections policy for sewage and water and wastewater within the council. We also don't have a policy relating to this and the variance of the standards of roads throughout our district and how we ensure that that's approached in a pragmatic way instead of creating huge, gigantic 20-metre sealed roads in the middle of the back blocks of Peria when necessary that isn't required. The other question that I had was on page 66. I like to see the unsealed network activities table there. Thank you, Calvin. Drainage renewals. I just wanted to highlight that I'm glad to see that being done, and I wanted to ask in terms of the current budget we're looking at and the priorities, are these things here in the unsealed network, are they likely to have any potential risk to those types of activities from the budgets?
As yet, we don't know the detail behind what the budget allocation is, but the indication is maintaining the existing budgets within those areas. So these are some of the key areas where we requested enhanced funding, primarily in the heavy metal and drainage renewal space. So as yet, we don't know the detail, but we understand that the levels will be around the equivalent amount of what they are at present.
Thank you. So we have Councillor Brett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep it quick. Thank you for this report, Calvin. Page 67, it talks about the development applications and the involvement that the NTA are having in that space, which is fantastic to see. It's more of just an administration thing, but I just wanted to point out that the graph is absent in the report, and it would be great to get a copy of that. That's a massive increase of 300 to 400,000, 300 to 400%. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
And that was picked up by Councillor Court, Eagle Eye, in the preview. So it has been emailed out, is that correct, Kim?
Through the chair, yes, it has been emailed out, as well as it will be attached to the minutes so people can refer to it that way.
Thank you. Also, our General Manager has highlights on page 104 of the business report. Thank you for your comments on this. Calvin is getting a bit of a workout today on the podium there. So all in favour of this item? Aye. And those opposed? No, carried. Thank you. So our next item, 5.4. Do I have a mover of that? I'm happy to move. A seconder? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Bissett, would you like to provide your comments?
Just go through the final report. So I'm just noted on page 77, fatal and serious injuries reducing trend, which is good, except in cycling, and which is not a surprise when you consider the number of increase in cycling that's on our roads, which was predicted that it would spill out to our roadways. So I'm just making a note of that. I'd like consideration, especially in that urban areas, which I presume is where it's occurring. And another question I've got is on page, and that's one of page 39, and the graph which is showing the billion of vehicle kilometres travelled, and looking at how it was laid out. So we've got 6%, for example, of primary collector and secondary collector, and I note that there's a 37% by traffic on the secondary collector road, and I'm wondering, given what was said before, early on today, whether our roads are adequately classified. Are they, given the volume of traffic, is that as secondary collector, primary collector and arterial correct? I don't know the traffic densities on them. I've done some quick calculations, and it seems to indicate that they are relatively correct, but I wouldn't mind your comment there.
Through the chair, they're correct in accordance with the one network road classification. So they're reviewed annual traffic count, but there's generally very little movement between the classification of the road.
Right.
They will also be reassessed when through the changed from one network road classification to one network framework. But yeah, that is the graph I was mentioning previously when we look at the percentage of kilometres travelled versus the actual percentage of the roads and the investment. So that's one of the areas that we're starting to map the customer interface.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our general manager also noted the date of it. So sorry, what were you saying, Andrew?
So through the chair, the reporting dashboard is for 1920. So it is 18 months behind where we are now, and that's just a timing issue around the publication of the document.
Well, it's a good document.
Through the chair on that, it is one of the reasons why you'll note that none of the asset management activities have changed in scoring. So effectively, in that 1920 year, it's still reflective of the previous activity management plan. We may not even see a change in the next cycle because the review of the AMPs will still be going through. So the reflection of improved quality that's shown in the comment I provided in the previous paper about the activity management plan may take another 18 months to come through in the scoring. So there's quite a bit of lag in the RCA in the REACH report reviews.
Madam Chair, can I just raise an observation about the quality of the report? And it's not a criticism of the staff, probably more a criticism of the road efficiency group. I just found that I gave up. It was too busy and too small, and it was just so hard to make any sense of it that in the end I just thought, oh, that's going in the too hard basket, and I moved on. So it needs to be in a more, I do not accept my colleague over the table who said it's a great report. I was frustrated by it. Thank you.
One of the things we also noted that the format of the report changed from the 1819 to the 1920 due to feedback from people. We have received indication that the 2021 report will follow the same format as 1920, which, while it's busy, will allow us to do direct comparisons of data, which we weren't able to necessarily do in this one.
Thank you, Calvin. I think the feedback is it's just really tiny, and so we can't read it. So maybe spread it out. A few space bars might help, and we might be able to get the information a lot clearer. So there's no other comments.
Oh, just very quickly then.
Sorry, I'm not going to do right of reply, so you're welcome to have the right of reply.
Well, that's on the same page, the fatal and serious injuries. If you compare that with one I previously raised, you'll see there is a slight discrepancy with the access speed of having more accidents than you expect. So I guess that indicates the state of those roads in relation to your earlier arguments you were made about the you got what
Different years, council of usage.
Sorry?
You're not comparing the same year.
Oh, the accidents in a different year.
Yeah, this is 1920. Calvin's
So if you compare this, I'm comparing one report with the other. So it's one graph with the other.
Can we get clarity on that, Calvin?
You'll see, just so I'm clear, I'm trying to be quick. If you look at, on the same page, the vehicle travel, the length versus vehicle K travel, and you compare that with the injuries, you will see that there is a bit of a spike in your secondary collector road.
So the graph on the top left compared, the coloured graph on the top left.
And when you see the vehicles on the road, so there's a higher incident per vehicles on the road, as I understand it, which seems to indicate that the road is more dangerous.
So just through the chair, I would like to point out that when we do serious crash investigations, road quality and condition generally is contributed in some part to only about 30% of accidents. Yeah. So we have impairment, lack of restraints, distraction, all those sorts of things. What is often noted is if the road had other enhancements, then it may have resulted in a better outcome. So it is difficult to draw a direct comparison between the number of accidents on the type of road and is that road being of the right quality. So we actually do separate investigations on each serious accident, and there's certain corridors that the road definitely is a contributor, and other corridors where driver behaviour is probably more of a key contributor.
Thank you. So that's the final NTA item. All in favour? Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Calvin. And I'd just like to note for you today, thank you for all of your efforts with your questions and your attendance and the NTA's reports. We'll move on to item 5.5, and I'm happy to move the slide to update. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Smith. We have staff here today, is it Helen, to speak to this paper. The staff would just like to come forward. Done our roads, now we're on to
sorry, I actually thought Andy
solids from our sewage.
This paper is a non-technical update of the activities that we've got planned to do for various reasons. Since the strategy was developed, the implementation of some of those suggestions in the strategy have been delayed for, as I said, for various reasons. So we have regrouped on what it is that we need to do. One of those things is to make sure that the strategy is still completely valid in today's world, and there are a couple of things that we have asked Jacobs to have a look at to ensure its currency, and one of those in particular is about emerging technologies, to see if there are other things that have come out that have been tried and tested maybe now that we could potentially look at using, whereas they might have only been ideas previously. So we are asking them to have a look at that in particular, and also to update based on the current proposals for both Paitara and Paikoi, which at the time the strategy was created, those detailed plans that we have now were not known. So that's about looking at that, and then we've created some tactical work streams to actually get some activity going across that impact across all of my teams basically. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Happy to take any questions if you've got any.
Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Encourt. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I'm going to be critical, and it's not critical of the report, it's critical of the timeline. And so please don't take my criticism to heart. Some years ago, Andy Finch and I flew to Taupo to look at vermicomposting. I can remember that day vividly, not only because we went and looked at this amazing vermicomposting plant, but it was the same day they announced funding for the roundabout at Waipapa. And I cried like a baby at the airport. I cried so hard the man sitting beside me thought somebody must have died, and he went, "It's all right, darling." I now have a roundabout. I don't have any progress with sludge. And my criticism is, let me rethink this. We have abatement notices. And what I'm reading in this report was some work has continued, overriding priorities have slowed progress. And then you just said that we're in the intervening time, other technologies have been tried and tested that could be used as potential solutions. And I'm just not sensing the urgency in this organisation. Sludge isn't sexy, it's not going to win you any awards like building around it, but it's really, really important. And I'm just not feeling that sense of urgency, and I'm concerned that it's stagnating. And as time marches on, there's always going to be new technologies and new ways of doing business. How long do we wait? I understood, and someone needs to correct me if my memory is a bit dodgy, that we approved money to buy some dewatering equipment, and we expected that work, I expected that work to be underway. So I think it was ahead of part, and I just don't know if I was asleep at the wheel or something changed. So I just want some clarity on that.
Thank you. We'll allow the staff to respond.
I just set the higher scene, just so we remember, because everyone's really intimate with what just happened in the last year and a half. It was really remarkable what we just managed, including 5 emergencies. Any one of them would have been significant. And elections with us to pull in external help and to spend almost 2.5 times our normal capital budget. I mean, it's just impossible stuff that our council did. And thank you very much for every moment of the track, recognising what extraordinary recoveries we did for drought and flood and COVID and all the extra funding that we're still working through spending. These are not without consequence, and some self-organisation is being required in the heat of the moment. I completely accept what I'm saying. I mean, I'm quite proud of the fact that this council member had a sludge strategy for I don't know how many decades until 2018, so congratulations to Andy under the governance and management of this council for getting it on the table. And I don't want to make excuses because we need to get this done, but it is in pace. A casualty of the extraordinary extra work we've done, and not a bad casualty really. I mean, because it's all recoverable. So that's part of the explanation. But I do agree with Andy.
So through the chair, I echo Sean's comments, but also comment that we have continued to desludge our wastewater treatment plant. So there has been work done on sludge, and we continue to do so. I think the sludge update is a recognition. The fact we brought it here today is a recognition that we do need to do better in that space, and it was noted in the comments with the team to do that. But just to be clear that we have been desludging our wastewater treatment plants.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Vucic and...
Yeah, I'll take on board the time taken, but I'm actually delighted on pages 86 and 87 that we are looking at those different options, so thank you for that. And I realise that you options, and professionally evaluate them and not just pick the first one that you see. However, I do wonder whether we missed the boat given the 3 walks reform, and I don't know what that actually means, but so I still be very keen to proceed on those options, because I'm sure that would be valuable going into the new entity, whatever it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So I support that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Helen like to respond.
Through the chair, did you want to add anything else, Helen?
Only to Councillor Ford's point about the purchase of the equipment, we have had issues from basically there is the 3 different suppliers we looked at for that equipment. Each of them needed componentry that came from one factory in Italy that was closed. From a COVID perspective, they reopened in November, working at half pace. So they won't even commit to a time frame of when that stuff will be available, which is why it didn't happen last year. So yeah.
That's a super cool information.
Yeah,
and
so
one that we can all live with, couldn't we?
Yeah. So that is actually why in the LTP that project got the funding got moved. It's as simple as that.
I think we should put warts and all in the report, because if I'd read that, I wouldn't have written up here. Forgive me.
With a swear
This is
word.
why they're taking the 3 waters of us.
Thank you. Councillor Smith has some comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for this report. It's great to have some progress in this space, acknowledging all of those delays. I think my only question was, I wrote in here, what is the D&D on next steps? And following on from Councillor Court's comments, it's great to see the following next steps are planned to support the overall strategy. It's really awesome to have a governance report in front of us that's proactive. My question is, do we have an indicative time frame of when those will be delivered? I mean, I don't have the technical expertise, so that could be anywhere from 6 days to 6 years in my eyes.
We have an offer of service from Jacobs for the strategy work, and also for the Kaitaia, looking at the Kaitaia drying pans. In fact, they have somebody visiting that site this week to have a look. They were going to be in the area for another purpose, so we've asked them to have a look at that site this week. So that is happening. So once I get that offer of service formalised, those dates will be around. But this is not a long piece of work in terms of the currency, and the Kaitaia piece is probably 6 to 8 weeks. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think of the other things. The engagement with the Taipa working group is probably going to be the longest piece. Treading slowly, being aware of the sensitivities there. There has been a little bit of interest when it's been raised, but we're just trying to build that aspect there. So that'll be the longest running one. The plant we are revisiting, so they've asked us to come back in August to consider dates. So we haven't put an order in yet because we don't know pricing and we don't know timing. So we're revisiting that in August. I'm thinking on my feet about when the other dates are, but we are progressing each of those things. So one of our engineers is in the planning team is already having a look at end use options, and he's building that into the work that he's also doing. He's connecting it to some disposal to land work that he's doing as well.
Thank you, Helen. Madam Chair, it would be great if those next steps could perhaps be reported on in the IAM's business report, just with progress on how they're... That would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Smith, and I have some comments about this one, and thank you to Councillor Court for raising similar issues that I wanted to raise about this. I'm aware of the context of being extremely busy in the last 18 months. However, I do recall us engaging contractors to do the dislodging previously on the premise that we were buying the equipment, but that also then been on the back of, I think it was 10 years of backlog of dislodging that we hadn't done, and getting to a really critical point, and we don't want to be in that situation going forward. So I look forward to that reporting in the IAM's business report. What does concern me is on page 86 and looking at the long-term sludge. It's great that we've identified Kaitaia, but I'm sure the ratepayers there are going to be asking, well, we pay a capital rate that only us pay. And if we're providing this infrastructure at our cost for the whole district, how is that fair? So do you have any comments on that?
So we're very aware of that, and we're very conscious of the fact that we need to consider what exactly we do in that space, at what cost, and how we allow for that cost to be recovered. So yeah, we're very conscious of that. That Kaitaia already has some sludge coming to it from other plants. So if we do expand that at all, then we will be having to look at how we recover those, or how we spread those costs across the groups that use it.
Thank you, and I don't know if Janice is online, but I'm sure she's aware of this as well in terms of our financial planning.
And just to your point about desludging, we have just, because of the fact we don't have the equipment yet, we have just pushed forward with Taipa and Rawene from an operational perspective. So Glenn's just organising those groups to get underway.
Thank you so much, Helen. So on that note, we've moved and seconded, so all in favour? Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Helen. And we are now on our last item for the meeting. As we've already done our public excluded matters, item 5.6, I'm happy to move. Is there a seconder? The
Yep.
items business report. Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I'll open this to the floor. We have still have quite some time, so you start with that. I'll be quite liberal with standing orders. So the timeframes.
Sorry. So many notes. So many notes, but I'm just going to stick to one today, actually, Andy. You'll be very pleased to know. And it's a very simple one. I note on page 102, central government policy submissions. And this isn't so much a question as a comment. I recognise that making submissions to central government policy would take a huge amount of internal resource. However, given the climate that we're in at the moment, with roading, with Three Waters, with RMA changes, with all of those things, I just wanted to highlight the importance of us putting our foot forward in these processes, telling our story and ensuring that our voice is heard in those processes. If that's something that we're not able to achieve, I'd be really keen to have that conversation. But what I'm hearing time and time again is that our voice just isn't heard in these central government processes, and we need to work harder on behalf of our ratepayers to make sure that it is. So I really just wanted to raise that. Thank you.
Are we going to hear mine?
I know.
So, given that our councillor report and then Councillor Stratford.
I have no sheets around.
Oh, great. Well, Councillor Stratford, you're up.
Oh, I just wanted to take the opportunity to commend the Three Waters team on the info sessions that they've organised for the Kaitaia wastewater treatment plant resource consent renewal and upgrade, and the Kaikoia one. So you'll find the event information on Facebook, but it would be good if they were on the website as well, because not everyone likes to go on Facebook. And there's also some work on providing information to elected members and the public around wastewater treatment plants. I call it a kōrero over kaka, because what I found in my conversations out with members of the public is that they know how the plants work. Why does, when it does smell, why does it smell? What are we doing to address that? And where are the discharge points? How is it, monitored and reported on? And we're going to start having some information like that going up on our website within the next 6 weeks. Not for all the plants initially, there'll just be a few that we're getting, very close with. So yeah, that will all be up there. That's me.
General Manager.
So just to echo Councillor Stratford's comments, we are developing what we're terming the plant on a page.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
So the intention being that we put the key operating characteristics of each of our water and wastewater treatment plants onto our website so that it's freely available. I know that we put Russell up there as one of the plants that we're going to trial. I think the others may well be Kaitaia and Kaikoia, but I may be wrong. Russell particularly because the community there have been asking for that information since 2017 and 18. So it's good news that will be happening.
Thank you. Councillor Rachel Smith.
Apologies, Andy Finch. Apologies, Andy Finch. I did have one other one, and you probably guessed what it is. Project Darwin. Project Darwin, I note a couple of things. For example, there is a note that says that Darwin does not currently have a budget, so I would be keen to hear a little bit more about that. But also the statement under roadmap, and we love a good roadmap. Revised timelines, deliverables and expectations detailed in November update to elected members are unrealistic. The reset session will provide guidance as to a revised roadmap, the velocity at which data cleansing being performed remains an issue. My question is, given that it states that the reset session is scheduled for the 21st of May 2021, in the interest of efficiency, do you have any commentary on that you can give us in terms of feedback and an update?
So what page you're on, Councillor?
Page 139, sorry.
So through the chair, programme Darwin has been challenging and continues to be challenging. I think the reset identified work streams that we need to progress. I'm pleased to report the technology work stream is well underway, and that is the system installation. We are about to take a paper through to get us through a gateway. So in terms of extending the implementation into the next gateway, and myself and Sean will consider that paper. The other work streams have been challenging, and I think the challenge is resourcing, and I'm sorry that word comes out again, but the key people that need to be involved in programme Darwin are also within the LTP, the annual plan, asset management planning, resource consent planning, wastewater treatment plants on a page. The list really goes on. We as an SLT and a leadership team do need to, one, prioritise programme Darwin against all the other priorities, and work that's coming out of Up and Out and other activities the council are doing to ensure that it continues to be a priority for us.
Thank you, Andy. Perhaps just taking the opportunity to re-cement the governance priority over this project and the dependability of so many other work streams from it. So,
we'll go to Councillor Vucic, and then Councillor Stratford has one other item to raise. And
Project Darwin, I think I raised that before, was my concern. But just very quickly, you've mentioned that. So that is a high priority from governance. So, I've heard all of the workload. I think it's up to management to look at adjusting the priorities, because we need that, as Councillor Smith raised. Without that, much of the other things that we plan to do and getting a good picture of where we're at is going to hinder planning going forward in our strategy.
thank you, Councillor Vucic. Is that your only item you'd like to raise today?
I'm really brief, as you're probably aware.
I'd just like to make aware to the electrons that seem to be adding on a few after they say they do have just one. We have one last point from Councillor Stratford, and then I can...
Yeah, sorry, I did write this down, but I forgot to say this one first. The number of water outages, I'm not sure really are reflected in the table versus the amount of...
Sorry, what page are you on?
257.
257.
Or 258, sorry, yeah, so the number of RFSs in relation to water, even the wastewater, but water in particular, I don't know if that data is being captured correctly, because Kaikoura have had a huge number of outages, and Kaikoura has, that one's probably reflected there quite nicely. But what I'm noticing, and I really appreciate, so as the Three Waters portfolio holder, when Andy can, he will ring me and give me a heads up about the drama unfolding. But unfortunately, the one that happened a couple of weeks ago for Kaikoura, I was just then entering into out of coverage. So there wasn't anything I could do with that information. But I didn't realise that I was out of coverage. But there needs to be improved, and we've discussed this before, improved comms to the elected member in that community. So Councillor Vucic or Councillor Tenia, the community board chair, need to be made aware in this area if there's going to be a breakdown, and we knew that it was going to be for a long period of time. There were businesses impacted that day that were very angry, and I don't blame them. I've been in that situation myself with an espresso machine. If you don't know how long your machine's going to be out for and it empties, you can burn it out, and that's thousands of dollars to replace the boiler. And then just not being able to tell your customers what's going to happen. And we had that in Kaikoura a couple of weeks ago. So we need to make sure that the right people are on the email chain, and please don't just leave it to me, because I felt terrible that that message hadn't got out to the affected businesses, the community. When I could, I put something up on Facebook, and that was helpful, but it was hours after we knew that it was going to be down for a few hours. Thank you.
Would you like to respond, Angie?
So through the chair, sometimes it is challenging in terms of communication. I know final orders do send out a email for every outage, and we need to just check the circulation of that email.
I don't think Richard gets it.
Actually, I thought Richard does, or maybe Ken. But certainly the comms team are included in that email. I think the challenge is always trying to estimate the time of restoration of supply. And I know orders do a reasonable job in terms of that, but sometimes they get that wrong. And they have recently set up an instant room that will actively manage all these outages and communications coming out. I think the challenge is not necessarily the ones that happen during normal office hours, it's the ones that happen overnight and at weekends that do become more challenging, how we deal with that and how we respond to that. And that may be something we can consider and work on going forward.
Thank you, Andy. I've got a couple of items to raise. One of them was a roadie one. On page 184 and also later in the report, it talks about Pedia Road. Some sort of Kiwi Road. It links right through from Taiwha right through to State Highway 10, right through to State Highway 1. And that was initially started in summer, but as does happen, it soon becomes winter and we run a construction season. So we have the NTA here. I just thought maybe we could just get some comments on when he thinks that that will be fully delivered, just because people are saying, oh, they've only sealed part of the road. Am I going to miss out? Or maybe we could have some comms around that as well, just out to the public to ensure that they're aware that it will be done. And I'm sure Calvin can.
So through the chair, I'm aware this is one of the PGF funded projects, so a significant amount of additional investment that's had across Calvin Road, because this was due to activity, and the credit to the team for getting where we've got to in the time available. But just noting, yes, perhaps we could do some comments on that as well.
Did you have any?
So through the chair, the sealing of that road is due to be completed in the start of the next construction season, so around September, October. We are supporting the internally NDC external project team in delivering that, so we're facilitating the contractors, but we're not leading that exercise. But definitely take your point, and we'll go back to David in terms of how we can communicate that to the community. Actually, on page 70, within that NTA update. So for Pedia Road, there's a kilometre left to seal. We've agreed with ND that remaining sealing will be planned for summer 2021-22.
Yeah.
For Mta Road, we've completed pavement construction, and again we'll be sealing that in 21-22. And for Revitalization Road will be late in the season in 21-22. So all those timeframes have been agreed with ND, but I'll take back to David in terms of how we communicate to the local people around there. I think the other road that was still had a small section was the TIF funded community road. There's a very small section where we're doing a cattle underpass at the moment, and that seal will be, I think it's 80 metres, which will be completed. So, I mean, all that's in total, I think there's been almost 17,000 metres dual laid this season, so it's a massive increase. But yeah, those ones, while it may seem that we started early, they are actually aligned with the MB timeframes and the construction timeframes. So in a lot of cases, we never intended to see down last season. So.
Thank you very much on that one there. The one I had, which was somewhat MTA related, but I just wanted to check with the Joe she was here. Low cost, low risk funding for footpaths. Driving around Kaitaia, I did notice that Dominion Road and Awanui as well, so Dominion Road in Kaitaia. This is on page 103. Dominion Road in Kaitaia, Donald Lane in Kaitaia, and Awanui on State Highway 1 got new footpaths. And I was surprised. I mean, great. I was pleasantly surprised, but I wasn't even aware that these were being done, and I wasn't sure if it was communicated through the community board or if I missed that one, or what the process is for communicating new footpaths under low cost, low risk.
So through the chair, those were part of the original community board program that were approved this time last year. If you recall, a number of those projects got deferred to late in the construction season because of the MB funding that we received, and we had the missing link footpaths come in. So all those previously approved footpath programs got pushed to the last quarter. So they were approved, but there's probably been a gap in communication from the time they were approved to the time they were constructed. We had with the local community boards on time frames and keeping them up to date on when they are going to be done, and assuring them that they would be done by the end of this financial year. So, yes.
Right. I guess it's just an email to the community board, just let them know they're doing it for a month so get done. And the last one I had, and always take great interest, I've got my pencil here, page 192, the Teku Revitalization Plan. All tracking well with that, seeing physical progress, and just like to thank the project managers on that one, and good to see some deliverables. But I think it highlights that we need to ensure that we're effective with our central government funded projects. This is just one of them, but that's a significant opportunity that we've been given, and we don't want to miss out by not meeting our milestones. So I'm aware that those milestone timeframes are coming at us thick and fast for a number of projects. So thank you for keeping us updated in this report, Andrew. So I can see that this is the last item, and Member Garden, you didn't have anything to add? I can see.
Yes, just and they're going back to that part, but I had no idea that the Awanui footpath was in the mix. And people from the community said to me, oh, I said there's a footpath going in Awanui. I said, oh, whereabouts is that? So I went right the length and breadth of Awanui and realised it was on the northern end, and it was obviously, I don't know whether it was an extension or whether it was a renewal, so I have no idea. But at least it's done to that point. The Ahikara Road one, in the urban area was a renewal. That's all.
Who was it, sorry? Oh, thank you, Member Gardner. Online we have Mayor Carter. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm having computer problems, so I hope I can plug into the next meeting, which I need to be on. I just wanted to make one comment. There was reference to when you were talking roading, and Anne saying that we need to make it political, or somebody did. And I just wanted to make the suggestion that if we've got issues like that, we need to take them to our local member of Parliament, to Calvin Davies and to Willow G, and discuss them. It's really important that we have that local input. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Carter. So that brings our agenda items to a close for the day. We've had this item moved and seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, carried. So to close the meeting today, we'll have a karakia. Councillor Stratford, Ina.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai tō tātou ariki o ihu karaiti, me te aroha, me te atua, me te whiwhinga kātahanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, ake, amene.
Thank you for attending today and enjoy the rest of your day. We now have the Audit Risk and Finance meeting next.
Don't run away yet,